What's going on, everybody? We got everybody here tonight. So, my brother from another mother, Jonathan Russian, is back, and we got him unmuted now.
Yeah.
And we've got Rod Saunders. I just turned him into Colonel Sanders.
Saunders.
Saunders is here. Rod, what in the world is opera? What opera? What thing is that?
It's a new browser.
Ah, gotcha.
I don't know who makes it or anything, but I'm trying it out.
So Flame of the Spirit, we're streaming simultaneously to Soul Vitamins and to Rod's channel on Facebook and YouTube. So, Jonathan, I'm gonna hand it off to you, and I'm gonna be watching these comments and chiming in. I've got some stats and facts to the side over here if we want to get into some of the statistics, but I wanted to get you guys back on here because I feel like there's been 3 years worth of political happenings in just the last 8 weeks. We've had a president drop out, a vice president undemocratically replaced, a former president assassination attempt. It's just been bonkers, in just a few weeks.
It kind of makes you wonder what we've got to look forward to in the next 9 weeks before the election, right? Because the previous weeks have been really weird. And the sad thing is things have become so weird. If the things in the last 8 weeks or 9 weeks would have happened 20 years ago, it would have freaked everybody out. It's kind of sad that we've become so desensitized to some of the craziness that is now politics. It used to be a gentleman's game, and now it's more like a mud wrestling match where everybody
It's become
gets
the
in there
WWF. It's become the
yeah, they get in there and sling dirt. And the thing is these are very serious times. I think it's important. I've had some friends that would say, oh, just don't vote, it doesn't matter. When I very much think it matters, because it's our chance to get our voice heard. And as long as the election's free and fair, there's a whole different episode we could talk about free and fair elections and what happened before and the conspiracy theories that are out there. But let's just assume for a minute that this coming election is going to be fair. In other words, all the votes are going to be counted and they're going to be legal. Let's just assume that's true, which is,
that's
we
a
hope,
big,
pray.
That is a big assumption.
But let's just assume that's true. Who we choose as our leaders and who we choose is important. And it's important not just from a political perspective, but also from a Christian perspective. Because, I can tell you from being in the business world, I used to think a lot like that. I used to think, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter a whole lot. And then when I got in the business world, started owning my own business, and I started seeing some of the small things that happen in the capitals of our country and even in our nation's capital have really large impacts down the line, from tax policies to, so I think a lot of times Christians want to think just about the big moral ones, LGBTQ or abortion. Those are huge, deals. But it's much more than that. There's economic policy, there's foreign policy, there's tax policy. All of these things come into play and really affect all of our lives. And so if we say nothing and we don't speak up, I can tell you this from talking to people on the left side of the aisle. I consider myself a conservative, but I know a lot of folks. I've got some friends who are on the far left, and they very much take it serious. They very much understand and realize that, voting is a leverage to action, and that action has consequences for all of us. And so, if every Christian would inform themselves and get out and vote in America, then I think we could see some real positive things happen. The problem is we have so much apathy, so much that don't care. And the other thing we have is so much ignorance. People
Yes.
who are not paying attention, who don't understand, and they really just truly look, and this is not just true on the right, but also on the right and the left. It's unfortunate that I would say even a majority of Americans never even study the issues or how these actions or policies are going to affect everyone. They just look on TV and say, ooh, they were better on the debate, or ooh, I think I would rather have a beer with this person. That's what they say, people decide. Instead of really digging in and finding out what the platforms say, what these different policies are. But here's the thing. The personalities really don't have a big impact on us as people. What really has the impact is the platform, is the policies. And so I think sometimes we have to have, discussions like this where we go a little bit beyond the personality and we start talking about the platform and the policies that are behind the personalities, because that's what's going to affect our lives, not just the personality. So everybody's sitting here saying, ooh, I think Trump's a meanie or an egotistical, or, I think she's a giggler, or which, we laugh about that. And depending on which side you are, the cuts are funny. For those on the right, when we hear her called the giggler, it's almost like a villain in a, Batman, movie. It's like the giggler, and she's, and then of course, on the other side, they say the big orange, the orange man, or whatever you want to call Trump. And these things kind of go back and forth in fun and jest, and that's all understandable. But at the end of the day, we've got to get past those personalities, and we have to start looking at what are those policies that these people support. And these policies have real implications on Americans. They have real impacts on Christianity,
on the church,
on nonprofits, on everybody's futures and pocketbooks, on our children. And so we have to really think about some of those things as we move forward. And I think it's important in these next 8 weeks that we start listening, and not just to the rhetoric, start listening more than watching. Watching is just watching it play out. That's the show. And that's what's going on in the next weeks. There's going to be a massive show. But I think the show is not near as important as what's the background, the policy. What do these people believe and want to do in America? And so I think that's what this podcast hopefully will be a little bit tonight, and talking about some of those policies and uncovering and unpacking some of them.
Well, and that's why having the two of you, I love discussing this stuff with you guys, because you are very well informed, very well read, very knowledgeable of our country's history, and especially our modern history. And you're not sensationalists. Y'all don't get riled up. I get riled up. I ain't gonna lie. I get riled up. So I represent a certain segment of the church that they see the nonsense and the filth and the ridiculousness, and they get ticked off, right? But you guys are very measured. You wouldn't know from if you judged if you were to assume Rod's denominational doctrinal views, you'd think he was a Reformed Baptist. I know he comes from the Baptist church, but he doesn't come off as Pentecostal, right? And especially when you're discussing this, you don't either. Rod, you have the floor, my brother. What's your thoughts on our current state of affairs? With all this craziness that's happened, especially with in light of what Jonathan just shared.
Well, I agree with what Jonathan said. Elections have implications and consequences, and we need to vote. Now, I'm not a Christian nationalist. I don't think that that the kingdom of God is going to be destroyed if the wrong person wins the election. The church will triumph. Jesus said the gates of hell would not prevail against the church. Sometimes we put too much confidence in man or political systems, instead of just focusing on God and his word and his kingdom. So, I'm all for praying and voting and supporting godly values, but just always remember that this world is not our home. And God is able to sustain America even if the wrong person, and by our understanding, gets into office. My first election was 1976, first time I voted. And I voted for Gerald Ford, and Gerald Ford didn't win. Jimmy Carter won. and I thought he was a terrible president, but we survived. And then,
And a really nice guy. He was a very nice guy.
oh yeah, he was a nice guy. I just didn't think he was. I thought he was in over his head as president. But anyway, um, be that as it may, we've had Republicans and Democrats, back and forth for 48 years. And I remember when Clinton got elected, a lot of Christian people thought it was the end of the world. But we survived 8 years of Bill Clinton, and then George W. Bush got elected, and all was right with the world, because we had a Christian man there
For a
in the
few
White
months
House.
until a couple buildings blew up.
Yeah, and after 8 years of Bush, I was no longer a Republican. I went independent. I said, I'm not doing this partisan thing anymore. And then Obama gets elected, and people thought, oh, it's the end of the world again. But we survived Obama too. And then Trump gets elected, and all was right with the world again. And then Trump lost, and, all hell breaks loose. Um, we have a way as a nation of getting through these things. And so I just don't get upset. I've told people that Donald Trump, I know a lot of Christian people think that he's King Cyrus. He's, got a place, he has a destiny to fulfill. But I'm telling people Trump might lose. And the reason I say that is because he has very high negatives. I'm a bit of a political junkie. And
That's what we're here for today, baby.
right. You about a third of the country is Republican, about a third is Democrat, and then there's a third that's third party or independent. And those are the ones that you have to win the election. And Trump has very high negatives and very low support among independents. And that could cost him the election. I really felt like if they had nominated DeSantis or Tim Scott or Vivek, I thought any of those guys would be a better candidate than Trump because they didn't have such high negatives. But, the Republicans just kind of galvanized behind Trump. So we'll see. He is doing some smart things, though. I have to hand it to him because he's gone on a lot of very popular podcasts and come across as much more reasonable and likable on these podcasts than what you would think based on things he's said during the campaign or some of his mean tweets and stuff. So he may be boosting his numbers with the independents. I don't know. We'll have to wait for a few weeks to see what the polls reflect, because last I saw, Kamala Harris was still slightly ahead in the national polls. But I just, I know all the prophecies, all the stuff about King Cyrus, and all that. It could very well turn out that Kamala Harris wins. And then what do you do with all your prophecies? What do you do with all your hopes that you were hanging on Trump?
Well, then, Rod, you just repackage them and come up with a new one and sell another book. This is a game plan for many years. It don't stop anything. It don't stop a thing.
That's true, because there was a book, 88 Reasons Jesus Will Come Back in 1988. And then
they came out with 89 Reasons He's Coming in 89.
The very next year, yeah. The guy wrote 89 Reasons.
And if that were today, I guarantee he could probably do that for about 3-4 years before he stopped selling.
24 reasons. He just started over.
Hey, maybe we should write a book right now, say 24 reasons why Donald Trump will be elected, and then we'll put out another book, 24 reasons why Donald Trump didn't get elected if he lost.
Well, I think Rod brings a great point. Listen, there is something, and I believe the driver is fear. There are many Christians who are so fearful, and it makes them feel better to feel like there's some type of master plan that, is going to rescue them from, certain demise, and the Christians shall rise again kind of thing. And, so they start to, and I've always said this, and I want to be clear, because I'm going to get on the left side here in a minute. I promise, because I think there's some real dangerous things being proposed in the policy. Forget the giggler, the policy is got some real dangerous, terrible things about it that I want us to dig into. But I will say this, as far as Trump goes, everybody is wanting to find, some type of spiritual deal, but let's be straight here. Again, Trump is, Trump is not an evangelical Christian. Now, I can't sit here and say maybe I don't know his relationship with the Lord. Maybe he believes on Christ. I don't know, but he's not what they're trying to paint it to be. Is basically, a Jensen Franklin in politics. He's not. If you don't believe, he slept with Stormy Daniels while his wife was pregnant. He's never said he didn't. Okay, he did. He has said those things. He's an egotistical person. He's done a lot of things. This idea that he's some kind of righteous is just not true. Now, he has policies that are friendly to the righteous, or to the evangelicals, I should say, when we call the righteous, we call it evangelicals. He has policies that are very friendly to the evangelicals, that very much lean towards what evangelicals, espouse. And I think that's what is attractive. But him as a person, let's don't be deceiving one another. And I get so concerned when I see people get up in church and act like, or even on YouTube or someplace, and they act like that somehow, they want to will him into evangelicalism. They want to will him to be, something, sent from God. And I always just have to kind of pull back on that and say, look, folks, it's getting extreme here. And as much as what are the things I admire about Trump? I've always admired the fact that he didn't have to be politically correct, that he does say what he means. But I've also unadmired his ability to not shut up when he needs to.
Yeah.
Sometimes Trump's biggest enemy has been Trump, especially in his first term. There was times that I would just think, just shut up, and everything would be great. But he couldn't resist, having to say something. And so there's no doubt. And listen, here's the big thing. Bill Barr was his attorney general. Bill Barr is one of the most fantastic minds I've ever read, especially when it comes into defense of religious liberty. I think Bill Barr, as Attorney General, is a man who is who has high integrity. Bill Barr was also the man that Trump loved until Trump tasked him to investigate the January, to investigate the election. And Bill Barr, who I believe to be a man of integrity, and I surely believe if he had found enough there to overturn the election, he would. But he came out and said, we have found in all our investigations no evidence of anything that would change the outcome. Didn't say he didn't find any irregularities. He just said it won't change the outcome, is what he said. And he basically was saying, and of course, Trump got very upset with him at that point, and he kind of attacked him. But I had followed Bill Barr, because Bill Barr, if you go back and read, I believe it's a talk he gave at Columbia, but he gave one of the greatest treatises on defense of religious liberty and religious liberty in America and what that means. And it was it was so powerful and it was so wonderful. The left's minds just exploded. They got so upset about it because, Bill Barr basically got up and explained what the founding fathers meant about religious liberty and how that we do have a right to believe and espouse our beliefs and live out our beliefs in public, and that the government shall not coerce or force us to do differently. And as he went through the legal ramifications of that and down through history, it was beautiful. It was eloquent. It was amazing. And I remember just being so proud that this guy was our Attorney General and that he was the one that was over, the Department of Justice. And so, I think sometimes when you see that these good men or people like Mike Pence, who I believe Mike Pence is a Christian man. I think Mike Pence was a Christian man.
Oh, Rod's he's got a lot to add there.
Yeah, Pence, none of these people are perfect. So let's don't, none of them are the apostles. But I believe if you go back and look at their governing style, their governing ability, things they've said, things they've done in private and in public, Mike Pence was a stand-up guy. Bill Barr was definitely a stand-up guy. Several of the other, people that were some of Trump's inner circle were stand-up people, and all of them said, "Hey, this guy's very imperfect, very problematic ego here." So, I think this is important because the reason I'm saying this is I think it's important for Christians and evangelicals and even conservatives like myself to freely admit the flaws of the man. If we almost make ourselves look stupid by going around acting like he is, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and Donald Trump. And it almost makes people not take us seriously because they're going, can't you see the glaring, obvious issues here? And we have to be able to say, yes, we do. We do see this. And if we were sitting here voting for, our favorite person to go have dinner with tomorrow night, maybe it would be a different vote. But that's not what we're voting on when we're voting on who's going to be president of the United States. What we're voting on is a person who is backed by a platform. And that platform is full of policies that have implications for everything of how we view and treat Israel, our view and placement in the world, in world economic forums, environmentalism, in tax policies, in economics, in crime, in the border and the things that go on there, in abortion, in LGBTQ issues, in religious liberty. We can just go down the line. I mean, and what we see here is that, I see two flawed individuals standing in front of us. And I see, I've got Trump here who, he has some flaws and some issues. I see, Kamala Harris standing here that really, it's obvious we got flaws and issues. If we want to jump into that side of it, I mean, we can sit there and talk about how bad Trump is. Well, I mean, Kamala, there's no denying the fact that she had affairs to get in positions. This is not deniable.
Unqualified.
People say, I can't believe you said it. Yeah, she admitted this. She was the mayor of San Francisco when she was trying to come up into the political world. She was having an extramarital affair with him. It got her garnered favor. Everybody knows that it got her garnered favor. Got her onto the council. Later, she was able to get in to be district attorney. Later on, she was able to get to be, senator. And listen, I mean, all along the way, there were some favors and things being done. We all know this. We're all also talking about a lady that ran for president against Biden in 2020 or 2019 going into 20, and she wasn't even a top 3 candidate.
She was the least popular candidate of all the other candidates. Yeah. Tulsi Gabbard smoked her, and she was unliked by all Americans. And now they're turning around and being like, oh my gosh, she's so great.
Yes.
I mean, 5 seconds ago, she was Indian.
And we're talking about a lady that's not once been voted on by any of the electorate to even be the Democratic nominee, because everybody did their votes and they cast them between Bernie Sanders, Bobby Kennedy, and Joe Biden. That's who the candidates were up for this, election that threw their name in the hat. She didn't throw her name in the hat. And so now, Biden won, then they said, hey, we got to get him out of here against his will. And so instead of going back and having some type of election or some type of process where they would come together and actually elect someone, they just coronated her and crowned her queen. And so now we're dealing with a person who has got the nomination for the first time of a major party without one single vote, and who is starting to espouse, and listen, she's very light on policy, and I think it's by design. If people really knew the policies, I think it would probably scare them, but she's starting to come out with some policies. And when we start to look at these policies, they're dangerous things, because they're literally communistic and ideal.
Straight
just
communism.
being honest. I mean, when you're talking about price controls, when you're talking about taxation on unrealized capital gains, and some of these other things that that she's wanting to do, and take these things under government control, this is communism light. This is not being. I'm not being hyperbolic here, and like, oh, he's just trying to scare everybody. No, these are the ideals that the Communist Party USA has had for many years, and has espoused. And these are also the ideals that in other countries that communists and Marxists have espoused. And, I think her father, who was, a Marxist,
Got fired for being a Marxist, for teaching Marxist nonsense.
I mean, this is not conspiracy theory. This is not being crazy. This is just saying, hey, look, this is what we've got. We've got on one side this, attractive lady who's, may seem nice, have a nice smile, but these policies behind her, and then you got this guy on the other side that, yeah, he can be egotistical and a loudmouth, but the policies behind him. And yeah, it's like I told somebody the other day, I guess for me, I'll take the egotistical loudmouth that aligns with common sense over an attractive smooth talking person that is going to literally usher in, if her ideals are implanted into our society. It's going to be a great challenge, and I agree with Rod. It's not going to collapse society. I think both
Not overnight,
sides,
but it's going to head us in that direction.
I think a lot of both sides get really into it because the Democrats have caught on this, and they're saving democracy. And so if we don't get that, they come up with their conspiracy theories that if we elect Trump, it'll be the last election we ever have, and they're saving democracy.
And it wasn't last time. It wasn't last time, so it's a horrible. They need to get some better talking points. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, but the Democrats, Republicans can be just as bad sometimes. When we say, I remember when Obama came in. I do remember that. Oh, this is the end of America. I can't believe we're going to do this. I can't believe this is happening. Because here's the thing: even though the presidency is important, and even though the administrative branch of our government is hugely important, it's not the only branch. We also have the checks and balances that are the legislative branch and the judicial branch. So just because she espouses a policy doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to come to pass. But there are some real damages that can be done, especially on the international scale, when we begin to talk about the relationship with her supporting and even defending Palestinian and terrorist organizations that want to annihilate Israel and calling for a genocide even worse than what Hitler called for in World War II. I mean, we're talking about from the river to the sea is an annihilation of over 6 million Jews, and they blatantly espoused this. They were standing outside the Democratic National Committee in Chicago last week chanting that very thing, from the river to the sea, and no one inside the building having the guts to stand up and say, we don't support calls for genocide. Could you imagine what it would be like if the Republican National Convention had been going on and their people had been standing outside calling for an annihilation of a race, for annihilation of all African Americans, or an annihilation of a race of people? Well, it would have been absolute, chaos. It would have been riots everywhere.
Bedlam.
But the problem is this bedlam. So we have to pay attention to the things that are being said, because I think sometimes we want to act like they're really not being said. But when they get in there and they say things like this and they support things like this, and I guess the other thing we have to pay attention is what's not being said. At some point, why doesn't the leaders of the Democratic Party stand up and say, we denounce this talk, this rhetoric, this movement, and we support Israel 100% and their right to exist? Because here's the crazy thing. They're still holding hostages tonight in Israel. They're still holding loved ones captive in Israel.
Since October 7th.
Since October the 7th. And all they're calling for a ceasefire more than they're calling for release. And here's the crazy thing. If they would release, there would be a ceasefire. So anyway, I could get into this thick and go on and on. But, I just want to say this. We have to start focusing on what's being said. And look, that those policy, deals, and I could go down through here, and I don't know, maybe we can take it but we could talk about economics and foreign policy and and the moral values and the things that are going on. I mean, when you have a Democratic National Convention where outside they're giving unrestricted abortion and free vasectomies. And then, it's no wonder when people say, hey, they believe in population control. You think? I mean, they're right outside saying,
Well,
look.
there's a reason why they're pushing what they're pushing on our children. But let's tag Rod. Rod, you got some thoughts to that? I can see some wheels turning. You've had a couple places that could have brought you in, but
Sorry, brother.
no, it's good, man. I'm here to listen to y'all. I'm here to listen to y'all, so I don't go off. And then we've got some questions I'm going to start pitching at you guys. So after Rod, I'm going to start addressing these questions.
I'm just going to add to what Jonathan was saying about Trump is not an evangelical. Back in 2016, I was a never Trumper. I said, there's no way I'm ever going to vote for that guy. I've never liked Donald Trump. I never watched The Apprentice. I've always thought that he was just a liar and an unethical businessman. And he's a New Yorker. I grew up in Texas, so, we don't really like Yankees in Texas. But I never really cared for Donald Trump. And so I didn't vote for him. I didn't vote at all in 2016. I said, this is the worst possible choice. Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, give me a better choice. Anyway, I did a video. One of the first videos that I ever did was about Donald Trump. And I said, he's not an evangelical. He grew up in New York and went to Norman Vincent Peale's church. I don't remember, Marble Collegiate, something like that. But anyway, Norman Vincent Peale was not evangelical. He was a New Thought proponent.
Power of positive thinking. Wasn't he the one that did that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's New Thought metaphysics. That's not evangelical theology. And
Right.
as you look into Norman Vincent Peale, some of the things that he said through the years, he said a lot of heretical stuff because New Thought rejects essential Christian theology. But that's the church Trump grew up in. And then as an adult, he became a Presbyterian. Now, during the campaign, he was going around telling people, hey, I'm like Ben Carson. He said, Ben Carson, he's a Seventh-day Adventist. I don't know about that. That's kind of a strange religion. But he says, I'm a Presbyterian. As though he's mainstream, he's normal. But what he didn't tell people was that he was from the PCUSA, the Presbyterian Church USA, which is the liberal,
the gay affirming,
Presbyterian denomination. Yeah. He wasn't Presbyterian Church of America. He wasn't PCA. He was PCUSA.
Which is so confusing. I get him confused all the time.
The PCA was what Dr. D. James Kennedy was.
And R.C. Sproul.
Right? Guess.
R.C. Sproul? Yeah. He's Presbyterian.
Right. He is was a Presbyterian. Yeah. So I guess, and he was a conservative, so I guess he was PCA. But they're the ones who, hold to traditional biblical values. But the PCUSA that Trump belonged to were, like you said, gay affirming and all that. So he was very misleading in saying that he was a Presbyterian without, going into
qualifying that.
Right. So I did a video on that, and I told everybody he grew up in Dr. Norman Vincent Peale's church, and then he became PCUSA. This guy is not an evangelical. Okay, so I got some pushback on that. People said, leave Trump alone. He's our only hope. That kind of thing. After 4 years of Trump, I thought, well, he did a better job than I thought he would. So, I kind of backed off my former position. I was no longer a never Trumper. I was just a reluctant Trump voter. But
RTV.
I guess you could, use that 3-letter acronym. Anyway, That's a very good point that Jonathan made. He's not an evangelical. He's never been an evangelical. And people have said, well, Robert Jeffress, the pastor of First Baptist Dallas, shared the gospel with him, and he accepted Jesus. And Paula White won him to the Lord. I've lost track of how many people have won Trump to Jesus over the last 7 years.
Listen, I tell you what might have done it. If he's gotten saved, I tell you what might have done it. It was that bullet.
Choo. Yeah.
I tell you, that to me is the most iconic photo of that entire thing, was when he was down for those few seconds and somebody snapped some pics when he was down. That's when they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, that one's got to be worth 10,000. I mean, imagine being that guy, that age, that famous, that rich, and you almost just got shot to death, literally doing a rally.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but he had the instincts, the PR instincts to
fight.
Right. He stood up. He said, "This is a great photo op moment."
Maybe. I mean, you never know.
I hate to be so cynical about it, but I do think that Trump realized, he's got the camera guys right there, and as soon as they heard the bullets, those guys got in position to take photos. And of course, how did he know the flag was going to be right where it was in the background and everything? But I do think he wanted to stand up and show everybody, I'm not going to be intimidated. I'm not going to be afraid.
I'm not going to go out a coward. I mean, if I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out fighting, because, the shots were still going off. So,
he insisted on getting his shoes, that tells you that he didn't want
to be undignified.
Right. Well, he didn't want to be carried off, and he didn't want to be in his stocking feet.
But I think what's concerning is sometimes this is what the election has come down to. This is going back to my original point. The very surface things of, and I get it, because we're a soundbite society. We like to make decisions based on just a quick snap decision. And we just want to get a picture and say, yeah, that's good, or that's bad, instead of really learning and understanding. And the reality is that's what we're going to see the next 8 weeks, is just two campaigns that are trying to capture the short-term attention span of most Americans. And I think that sometimes, though, what's so sad is we're not really talking about the things that, because those short-term attention spans are not going to have any kind of impact on what's going to happen after these people get elected. And I think one of the big things for me, I take one, let's just take one off the top here. When we talk about this, transgender issue that we see going on, and most people, a lot of evangelicals just say, oh, it's not a big deal. And, they kind of,
if they are, man, they're crazy.
Well, when I say this, it's not a big deal. It doesn't touch me. I don't believe it. But here's the thing. In the 60s, Lyndon B. Johnson passed the Anti-Discrimination Acts, which really, made it a federal offense and, against the law to discriminate based on race, age, and sex. And until recently, sex was considered, gender. It was considered, a female. So it became against the law to discriminate against a woman based on her being a woman. And that was how it was done. And I don't think there's any of us.
Now we don't even know what a woman is.
Well, here's the thing. No one in a time, and I think it was 1968. I think that's right. But in 1968, when that act was passed, the Anti-Discrimination Act, when that was happening, no one believed that transgender was there was no thought of transgender. It wasn't even in existence in most people's minds. It was some real wild, weird something out there that, some, cross-dressers or something did, and it was not talked about publicly. And so when they passed that law, there was no one that stood there and voted for that law and passed that law that said, hey, we think that this Title IX of this Discrimination Act, which is for the part about gender, applies to any kind of transgender. And so what happened is we saw Obama started to do this, and he started getting into this with what he called letters of influence. So he didn't come out and point blank say this is Title IX also encourages protections of transgender. He just started sending letters of influence to the Department of Education, to school systems. And then when Biden came in, Biden stepped it up and said, hey, we're going to start saying that Title IX now encompasses transgender protection. So that literally to make it a reinterpretation, this is important, everybody needs to understand, a reinterpretation of the law that now says that Title IX that was passed in 1968 that had nothing to do with transgenders now has everything to do with transgender. Now Title IX has the force of the federal government and elected law behind it. And now they are saying to schools, hey, if you're going to receive federal funding, if you're going to receive any kind of grants, we're talking about Christian education institutions, nonprofits, you're talking about, all kinds of different entities out there. And, a lot of folks think, well, they can't come into a church. Well, for right now, that's true. But there's so many parachurch ministries out there like Christian schools and universities, Christian high schools, Christian day schools, things where people get together of like faith and say, hey, we'd like to take our child over here and have them taught in a educational environment that supports our faith initiatives, which we have Christian schools all over the country. And most of those schools until now have been able to get federal funding. They can apply for federal funding because they're performing the act of education, and through the Department of Education, they're able to get grants and funding and all of these things, voucher programs and different things that happen. So all of a sudden, Biden comes in, the Biden administration comes in and says, hey, we're now saying that Title IX.
No, you had it right in the first. You had it right in the first.
Okay.
The Biden administration.
Yeah. So Biden comes in and says, okay, listen, Title IX now means. And listen, no one elected this. No one got together. It's one thing to get together in Congress and say, we would like to amend the Discrimination Act and add to it this so that it now protects transgenders. That's the system that the forefathers laid out, that you get your representatives up there, they present a bill, which is going to be a law, you amend the law and you add to it. And that's how you get it. But the Democrats no longer believe in this because now it's a matter of interpreting the law. So in other words, they're going to take a law that was never meant. And here's the sad thing about it, and here's the scary thing about it for everyone to understand. If you start interpreting laws in this way, there's nothing that you can't really do with the existing law because it all becomes interpretation. It doesn't mean what it means. So we have to ask, this is where we call what we call contextualists. In other words, or originalists, I should say, originalists. Originalists are, it should be enforced based on what the original principles were that passed it. Okay? So that's where a lot of conservatives stand. This is basic conservative doctrine. It's just like the Declaration of Independence. I mean the Constitution. The Constitution, you say, we're originalists. We believe that the Constitution should be adhered to based on the understandings that the founding fathers had, and if it needs to change, then do what it needs to change it. So an example would be gun control. Okay, gun control is the easy one to see. First Amendment says, "Thou shalt not," that we have a right to keep and bear arms. Yeah, yep. And we have a right to keep and bear arms. Well, we believe that the originalists, the Constitution founding fathers said, "Hey, you have a right to keep and bear arms, to protect yourself, to have guns." But now you have the Democrats and the liberals come and they say, well, this is what they'll say. The Constitution is a living, breathing document that changes with time. And so we have to reinterpret their meaning. And so as we reinterpret their meaning, the right to keep and bear arms was only intended for militias, and it didn't take into account the things of today. I've always said back to these liberal friends of mine, hey, look, it's very easy. You go get enough people, and if you get enough people together to agree with you, then you can actually ask for a constitutional amendment. And if you get 2/3 of the Senate and the Congress and 3/4 of the states to ratify, you can put a right to take arms away in the Constitution. There are ways to change the Constitution. And here's the thing. the Founding Fathers meant for that to be a difficult process so that we didn't just change things ad hominem and with culture, whims and woes. And so when we pass laws, those laws should be meant for exactly what they were meant for. 1968, those men and women that were in the Congress passed a law that people should be protected, women should be protected from discrimination against men, and being different from men. Great. The problem is that now we have Democrats who are saying it's a living law, it's a breathing law, that we need to reinterpret this law. And so what we're going to now do is just suddenly pull out of the air and say, hey, this means that transgender should be included in this law. And of course, this just went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 and put a stay against that and said, hold on, you can't impose these laws because it's not in the interpretation. Supreme Court's not there to make law. They're supposed to be there to interpret the law. And so the Supreme Court says, no, this isn't a part of the original interpretation of the law. Here's the problem, though. As soon as they said that, your Democrats, including Biden, including Kamala Harris, they said, well, we need to get rid of the court as it is. We need to expand it. We need to put more people on it, which is literally nothing except, and we need to put term limits on it because they're upset. And here's the thing they're upset about, because they want to legislate law through the judicial branch instead of legislating law through the legislative branch. So here's the truth. This is God's honest truth. If it was up to the present Democratic mindset, we would do away with the legislature. And the only thing that would really matter would be the administrative branch that is saying, thus saith what we say, and the judicial branch that rubber stamps it. And that's the truth. There's no other way to see it, because that's how they want to do this, because they did the same thing with abortion. People, me and you were talking today, Gabe, when abortion happened in 1973, they pulled something out of the Constitution.
They legislated from the bench.
They legislated from the bench and pulled
Same thing with gay marriage.
Same thing with gay marriage. And people say, just like, it just came out and said, oh, they did away with abortion. No, they didn't. They didn't do anything away with abortion.
They kicked it down to the states where it should have been anyway. And even Justice Ginsburg, she even said that. She wrote a whole paper on it.
They did away with the government mandated freedom of abortion because there's nowhere in the Constitution. Now, here's the thing. If the Congress got together and they decided they wanted to have an amendment that would make abortion legal and unfettered all through the U.S., it's real easy. They get 2/3 of the Congress and 3/4 of the states to ratify this thing, and they get an amendment that gives abortion, and the Supreme Court can't overturn that. And so the problem is the Democrats and the liberals, well, many times they just don't want to go through that process. That takes too long. And why? Because it was all built by the Founding Fathers to build consensus, to stop conflict, to get it to where the majority of Americans and majority of American territories agreed. And so this is what happened with gay marriage. Here's the crazy thing about gay marriage is states all over the United States were putting it as legal. It started with Massachusetts, and then it eventually went out, and Iowa shocked everybody and made it legal in different places. But you had other states that didn't. And the problem was, this is the way the Founding Fathers meant for it to be, that the states were to be the test beds of democracy. And that if things didn't work in states and the rest of the states didn't want it, then we said we're not going to do it. But then all of a sudden they said, that's not fast enough. That's not good enough. We need to take this to the Supreme Court and get them to mandate it. And so what's happening is they're trying to do the same thing with Title IX. They're going to try to do the same thing with health care and abortion through health care. They tried to do it with the Little Sisters that Obama took to court because they said, hey, we don't want our plans for our health insurance to offer abortion and contraception to our adherents here because we're a religious organization. And Obama took them to court to try to force them to do it. And thankfully, the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. So it's amazing. When the Supreme Court rules in favor of the Democrats, then they love them. We need to really adhere. These are the people of wise choice. When they rule against the Democrats, they say, hey, we need to pack this court.
They're tyrants on the bench, and they're
legislating from the bench. We can't believe that they're holding back our progress, holding back our freedoms. And that's exactly what the Supreme Court was set up to do, was to hold back the abuse of freedoms and the abuse of the legislature and the administrative branch. They're functioning just like they want it to. And so my point is, and I got to shut up here. I'll let Ron talk because y'all didn't come in here to hear me all night. But it's just literally, it comes to this point where if we just take something as simple as that, these are policy issues that matter. So if you are a Christian school teacher out there, this should bother you, because if she and the Democrats are able to push this through and make it to where you have to use the pronouns of choice and let children go into a bathroom that they shouldn't, that's against their biological sex, you will be if you stand against that, you will be breaking federal law, which means you have rights to be fired and let go from your job.
Oh, not just that. They're going to take your license. You're not going to be able to teach.
Yeah.
And they'll probably put you in jail on top of it for good measure.
Yeah. So then people say, well, that's okay. I'll just go over to the Christian school. Well, the Christian school can't get federal funding.
It's not going to exist.
Because they can't exist without the federal funding. So all of this stuff comes into play. And these are policy things that matter. And the problem is we're too busy talking about Trump being, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit protege, and the giggler. And the giggler over here, and that's all everybody wants to talk about. And I'm
come on, man.
But I'm sitting there going, but the policies have real implication.
Yeah.
Because you got Trump on the other end that says, I'm totally against that. We cannot make people do that.
And I think that's the issue, or one of the issues. I mean, we've spent a good 20, 30 minutes tonight just talking about, well, listen, we're not for Trump because of these reasons, but I feel like there's a lot of believers and a lot of pastors that don't want to push, or encourage people, listen, this is how we need to be voting. It's because, well, he's not a Christian, like the other side is. So it's kind of ridiculous that we could end up in a real place of God honest, persecution. And I'm not saying the world's going to come to an end, but I mean, we're already being heavily censored on the internet. I mean, just today, what was it, just yesterday or today that Zuckerberg spilt the beans that the Biden administration told them to censor Americans on Facebook? You are not going to allow these things to, you're going to cancel these posts. You're going to, cancel these accounts if they're talking about XYZ. I mean, this is the reality, and you can't tell me that the American federal government is pro-Christian right now. You cannot tell me that. They're not.
Well, it's not just that. They're not even Christian. We're talking about freedom. So like, you can see that when Musk, who's, no professing Christian either.
Not at all.
When he went and bought Twitter, they lost their ever-loving minds. They said, oh, this has got to be stopped, because all of a sudden here's a guy that is not part of the, leftist elite that was saying, hey, we're just going to let people get on here and say what they want to say. And, oh, by the way, we'll let Trump have his account back. He wasn't
the evil billionaire until he did that. He was, he's going to save the world with his electric cars and his space program. He's such an innovator, and he's a free thinker, and, he's for progressive this and this. He did what? He's an evil billionaire. It just turned into the Bernie Sanders rhetoric.
Well, it's Oprah saying that Trump would be a good president, years ago.
Telling him he should run.
Then she's up at the DNC saying, we got to save democracy. Sorry, Rod. Go ahead, jump in there. I'm going to shut up.
You talked about Elon Musk. He actually said that he bought Twitter to preserve freedom of speech. And he said, if I lose money, then so be it. Because it was not a profitable thing. The amount that he paid for Twitter, he overpaid for it.
Yeah.
That was the way that he got people to give up their stake in Twitter by offering them a high price per share. And so he overpaid for it. And a lot of people thought, oh, he's brilliant. He's going to turn. I mean, I heard Patrick Bet-David say this, that Elon Musk is going to turn Twitter into a $1 trillion company, and it was a genius move because this is the leading forum for discussion on the web. I don't think it was a brilliant move. I think it was a bad business move, but he didn't do it for business reasons. Now he may eventually figure out a way to make this thing profitable. We'll have to wait and see. But I hear a lot of Christian people talking about how wonderful Elon Musk is, and I think a lot of them have bought into a lot of the marketing of Elon Musk.
Freudian slip there.
They're both billionaires and provocateurs. But anyway, Elon Musk, if you look into this guy, he's got some really crazy ideas.
Yeah.
Put chips in people's brains. Let's go to Mars.
Well, now
let's get the elites off the planet.
The whole Neuralink thing, I think maybe some people have blown that out of proportion because it's supposedly to help people who have neurological issues. It's not necessarily we're going to plant chips in everybody's brains, but it's supposed to be a therapy thing. But if you develop the technology, it could be used by nefarious people for anyway. But the whole Mars colonization thing, that's what gets me. We're not going to colonize Mars. It's 80 below zero on Mars. We would have to terraform everything there, and we haven't even been able to successfully do that on Earth. But people are all gung-ho about colonizing Mars. You just go through the list of some of the things that he's proposed and worked on. I don't think he's the genius that a lot of people think that he is. I think he's a little bit, he's innovative, but he's also a very good marketer. I think he's learned a lot from watching Trump over the years, and he's figured out a way to sell himself as a genius. Now, I do think he's done some pretty incredible things with the SpaceX technology. But if you go back and you look at a lot of the things that he's been involved in, like PayPal, was it PayPal?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he was one of the founders of it.
And he wasn't actually a founder. That's the thing. It was already founded. He came in and took charge of it. Yeah, and he took credit for founding it, but he didn't really found it. And the same kind
of like Zuckerberg didn't actually invent Facebook.
The same thing with Tesla. He didn't really found Tesla, but he went in there and took it over and made it work business wise. Because the biggest problem with electric cars was not the technology; it was the business end of it, making it profitable. They had the technology, they just didn't know how to make it marketable and profitable. And he figured out a way to do that with Tesla. So he's got some good ideas, but he's got some crazy ideas too. And I think Christian people ought to be a little bit more discerning when it comes to
the only people that have discerning are the discernment hacks on YouTube, man. They're the only ones that have true discernment. The rest of us, we're just sheep. I'm totally not serious, by the way, if you can't tell by my chuckle afterwards, internet world.
Is somebody playing ping pong or pool? What am I hearing?
Is that you, Jonathan?
No, I don't think.
Well, that was
Wasn't
weird.
Me. It was the internet. But so what do you think, Rod? Like, what's some of the policies that you're hearing on both sides what's something that you're hearing from one side that you're like, that's pretty good versus that's
I'm
very
not
bad?
I'm not hearing any policy coming from Kamala Harris.
No.
She's not talking. She's basically hiding. She's, I guess, going to try and do what Joe Biden did in 2020 is just not answer any questions or do any press conferences or anything like that. But she is going to do a debate, and so some of these things, I guess, will come out during the debate. But you can figure out her policies by looking at what she said in the past. And she does have a very, I think, leftist view on economics, redistribution of the wealth, things like that.
That always works out great, right? That's just fantastic.
Yeah.
Sarcasm.
Well, Obama said stuff like that too, but I think Obama was more pragmatic. Once he became president, he knew that he couldn't really push a leftist, a Marxist agenda.
An inch at a time. He was very smart. He was, by inches and feet, not by miles.
Mm-hmm.
And look, the thing is, she's being very smart. And what I mean by this is there's a reason she's not talking, because the media is putting on the show. So in other words, the less you say, the more you can paint the person to what you want them to be. Yeah. It's like if you put me on this. You could put me on this channel here tonight, and I could sit there and just smile, and you two could come up with all kinds of things. Say, look at him. He looks nice. Look at those blue eyes. I bet he's a kind guy. I don't know, but he eats a lot, so I bet he's mean to people. I mean, you could come up with all kinds of, narrative. But that's kind of what she's doing. She just smiles in the camera, and the media dances around and says, she's wonderful. Look at her. Look at all the things. Because if she starts to actually espouse what she believes, then that becomes a problem, because then your narrative gets messed up. And so she's actually running a smart campaign in that I kind of predict this. I'm starting to believe that she's never going to debate Trump, because now they're arguing over.
She can't. She will get
arguing
destroyed.
Well, she's arguing now over the rules, and so I can see this very much and easily devolving into, we can't agree over the rules, so we're just not going to debate. And so what happens is, because when you debate, you have to actually speak and answer questions, and you have to espouse policy, and you have to say, this is what I believe. And this is why in some ways she was the perfect candidate, because she doesn't have a long record. She doesn't have all of this stuff. And so she stayed pretty quiet. But we can definitely see, though, even the things like she came out, the one thing that she did come out with is she did say, okay, I'm going to unleash an economic policy. Now, if you go read that policy and what she's talking about in price controls and taxing unrealized capital gains, I mean,
it will bankrupt all of us.
So for the viewers here, let's just explain what this means for the viewers here. Now, she's saying that it's only going to be for people that make over 100 million. Who knows? But even talking about this is crazy. So in America right now, here's the way it works. If you live in a home, your home, and you've lived there at least 2 years, and you sell that home, you do not get taxed on that home. There are no capital gains tax. You get to keep that if you live there at least 2 years. But let's say you're living in a home and you find a great deal on a home across the town. And you say, you know what, I'm going to buy that, and I am going to fix it up, and I'm going to rent it out. So you buy it for $100,000. You put $50,000 in it. You got $150,000 all in. And then you keep it for a couple of years, and you're renting it out, and you decide the market goes up, and you say, hey, yes. And so when you sell that, you have to pay a capital gains tax. That is what they call a realized capital gains tax. That means you're paying the tax out of the sale of it. So that means if you bought it, got 150 in it, and you sell it and you get 300, you'll have to pay a certain amount of taxes on that 300,000 for capital gains. That's what everybody in America kind of has to do. I actually hate the capital gains tax because I think it hurts investment, but it's
all theft. It's all theft.
But here's the thing. Trump was trying to push that capital gains tax down so that we could keep more money and drive investment. So people have more money, they make more money, they're able to, that boosts the economy. You're basically giving investors money back into their pockets to reinvest and to also utilize to grow. So Kamala Harris comes out and says, you know what? I think what will be a great idea is that we do an unrealized capital gains tax. Let's take that same scenario. You buy a $150,000 house, and then the tax value comes out on it after a couple of years, and that tax value's gone up to $280,000. You haven't sold it. You haven't done anything with it. It's just been assessed that the value is higher than what you paid for it. Then she wants you to have to pay an unrealized capital gains tax to pay for it, meaning that most people in that scenario are going to have to sell to pay the taxes. You're going to have to get rid of it.
$45,000 is what you would pay on the unrealized capital gains tax of $180,000 increase in value.
Yeah.
So you invested $50,000 into the house to make it worth something more, and you're going to have to pay $45,000.
Right. So people, this is important. She thinks this is a great idea. At the same time, she says that she's going to institute price controls on medicine and food and, basic staples like that. What that means is that the federal government now will come in and just some committee somewhere, instead of economics runs on supply and demand. So if all of a sudden, we saw this during COVID, all of a sudden there's a rush on toilet paper, then the price will go up because the demand increases. But when the demand falls, it goes cheap, and that's really what happens. And the whole economic system for eons of years has run on supply and demand. And that's what keeps the market honest. You get somebody that wants a lot of your product, you're able to charge more, and then all of a sudden they don't want your product. There was a time you could buy Beanie Babies and it would cost you $20 to buy a Beanie Baby. You can't sell them now for 20 cents. I mean, if you want to, because nobody wants Beanie Babies anymore. So the thing is, supply and demand has always been a basic economic principle. It's economics 101. And she's saying that basically what's going to happen is the government's going to come in and they're going to set prices on food, and they're going to say you can't charge any more than this and you can't charge any more than that. The problem is, how are you going to do that? Because unless that price, say I'm going to set a price on the price of lettuce and say lettuce shall not be any more than $1 a head. That's it, folks. You're not going to have to pay any more than $1 a head. How is that farmer going to produce it? If he can't produce it for $1 a head, that means he's got to lose money to make sure he meets the price control. Eventually, the farmer goes out of business because he can't cover that, and he can't make any money. And
people starve. Sounds exactly like communist. Sounds like communist Russia and communist Ukraine. Exactly what happened there.
So here's the reality. Price controls have been tried before. They've tried them in Venezuela. Y'all heard about what's going on down there?
Where they're eating children and dogs.
Yeah, they've tried them in other places to price control. So here's the crazy thing. She comes out with this policy. Economists on the left and the right all said, this is crazy. This is not even sane economic theory. This is going to destroy the economy.
Well, you know what it is? She said the quiet part out loud. I don't think she was supposed to say that out loud. Or maybe they're just testing us.
But look, it's the same thing over in California. Hey, they mandate a $15 now, $18 an hour minimum wage. Sure, you can mandate that, but most of those small businesses went out of business. Or if you did somebody like McDonald's over there, they all went into automation, started hiring. Basically,
I thought they went higher. Didn't they go to like 20 or 25, or weren't they proposing like 50 for like was it U-Haul or UPS or like one of those driving companies, like delivery companies?
Yeah, so the problem is when you start playing with the economics like this, you've got a person in office there who has it's obvious to me, has no understanding of economic policy.
But that's the problem that's most politicians, though. They've never owned a business. Joe Biden never worked a real job, and they want to talk about this guy. He was a servant. He served this country. He gave his heart and soul. I'm like, gave his heart and soul? This man got rich off Americans. What are you talking about? He never had a real job. Bernie Sanders has never had a real job. And exactly to your point, they want to dictate economic policy when they don't even know how to run a lemonade stand. Because they have no idea how money works.
Just understand this, anybody viewing here, listen to me closely. Everybody needs to hear this. It sounds real nice when you say, hey, somebody's going to put a price control on medicine and food. Well, that's a good thing. I mean, that's making sure. It never in all of its history has ever stopped just there. It
Nope.
can't stop just there, because
Nope.
the only way that you can control the price of lettuce is then you're going to have to go down the line and control the price of fuel to get the lettuce to market. And then you're going to have to control the price of the vehicle that runs that fuel. And then
And
you're
you're going
going
to
to have to
control the
control
farmer.
then you're going to have to control the price of fertilizer, and then you're going to have to control these prices. And literally what you're doing is it is a nationalization of industry, which is communism. And anybody can say what they want about it, but this is economic theory. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is basic economic theory.
Yep.
And this is what she came out and said is a good thing. So let's take all the abortion stuff set aside, LGBTQ stuff set aside, all the church stuff, and is Trump a wonderful man or not? And her, she's this. Let's look at this economic policy. Do you want someone who's going to come in and basically ruin everybody's ability to invest, create wealth, and have a successful business? And if her policies are put into action, that's very much a possibility. And that has nothing to do with any kind of moral implication. That's an economic implication. And so this is something she has espoused. Now, I won't go on because I know I could go on another hour and talk about Israel, Hamas, NATO, our standing in the world, what's going on with Iran, why Iran is so emboldened. I will tell you this, I do believe Trump. When Trump said, if I was in office, they would not have attacked Israel in such a way. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, because, listen, everybody knew Biden was not going to do anything. I mean, we saw what happened with Afghanistan. Trump is bringing up a salient point. We walked out of Afghanistan and we left hundreds of people, maybe thousands, to be slaughtered by the Taliban that had helped us as we abandoned them, and left over $2 billion worth of equipment that they just had a parade 2 weeks ago where they came
With
through
our
Iraq
gear.
with all our weaponry and said, hey, look at what they
Listen.
left us free of charge.
I say start a movement where we can write that junk off on our taxes and be like, I ain't paying no taxes. My taxes over there in Afghanistan. Why don't you get my tax dollars back? Rod, did you want to respond or add anything to what Jonathan said before I start getting to these questions?
About economics?
About her, her wild, crazy communism economic policy of, the unrealized gains taxes, and then wanting to control basically put price, control the pricing of things that America needs.
Well, Nixon did that.
Really?
Nixon imposed a wage and price freeze when inflation became a big problem in his second term, which was short-lived. But yeah, it was like 90 days, something like that, a temporary wage and price freeze. And, he got a lot of flack for that from his own party.
Oh, yeah.
Because
rightfully so.
Nixon was a Republican, but yet on economic policy and social policy, he was a lot more liberal than most people realize. So we've done it here too. Didn't work. Because, like Jonathan points out, the economics is this multifaceted thing. You've got to pay the mechanic to fix the truck, and if you freeze wages and prices, and the mechanic's not able to make enough money because he can't get a raise, then that's going to impact his family, and so he won't buy as much groceries or whatever. Maybe they won't go out and buy a big ticket item, and so what they don't buy that they could have bought if he'd gotten a raise, that's going to cost that's going to cause somebody in manufacturing to get laid off because there's less demand for the products, because this guy can't buy the products because he can't get a raise because of the freeze. So they get laid off, and then
The domino effect.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is everything? Economics is a very complicated, multifaceted thing, and you can't just
Wave a wand.
impact one sector without the ripple effect going all through the economy. So this is a very basic thing, I think, in economics, is that you have to let market forces drive the economy rather than government controls. And I think a lot of these people who are positing certain economic theories and policies don't understand that.
Have no idea how it works.
Right. I had a guy one time. This was years ago when I worked in IT, and the guy that I was working the night shift with, he was talking about raising minimum wage, and he was all for raising the minimum wage. He said, you can't afford to provide for your family making $5.75 an hour. And I said, who starts a family when they're making $5.75 an hour as a burger flipper? Well, not everybody, not everybody plans their family. Well, you should plan.
That's your fault, not our fault.
Right. And so he said, well,
responsibility.
He said, look at all the billions of dollars McDonald's has. They can afford to pay their employees more. And I sat there looking at him like, are you an idiot? And he thought he'd made a real good point. And McDonald's has billions of dollars. Why can't they give their employees a raise? And I said, McDonald's is a franchise.
Mm-hmm.
You understand how franchises work? You think the McDonald's Corporation owns all these McDonald's restaurants? They're sold to small businessmen who operate on a fairly thin profit margin. And they can't afford to give their employees a $2 raise without raising the price of the food.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't understand how business works. He thought that the McDonald's Corporation...
But you know what the problem is, Rod?
Is
lining
their pockets.
Well, this is the problem. That guy votes. This is the problem. That people like that are uninformed and ignorant and opinionated, and they all have a vote. This is why you're seeing a movement of people wanting to restrict voting rights. Because we're getting to mob rule.
Here's what's crazy to me. Do you know the average profit margin in a grocery store? National profit margin average in a grocery store.
5%?
2%. Margin. The average margin is 2%. I don't know why.
You got balloons for it.
Did you do that?
No, that's your Apple computer. That's how it lets the government know you're throwing up peace signs.
Did he clap?
I don't know what happened, man. I was like, how did I get balloons?
Gotta pop them. If you do a thumbs up, you'll get a thumbs up bubble. Watch.
I want a balloon.
But no.
There you go.
Yeah, there it went. Peace. No, so listen, the average is 2%. The average for Apple is over 50% margin. No one's talking about price control in them Apple iPhones.
Come on.
And so that's what's so funny. This is the danger, everybody. Listen, this is the danger. When you start picking and choosing, the government is getting involved in picking and choosing. Who do you think is going to go suck up to the government then at that point? The people that don't want price controlled.
Yep.
So in other words, of course, you are using the government's power to inflict influence based on your ability to send out a price control. Hey, Apple, you're going to tick me off, then we're going to send out a price control.
Yep.
So what happens is when she started talking, it didn't make any sense. She said, I'm going to put a price control. I think we ought to have price controls on food. It's 2% margin. No one said anything about Apple getting a 50-some% margin. And of course, I'm not for price controls on Apple either. If they don't make a good product, people won't buy it. And their margins will go down and they'll have to readjust. And that's how the market moves and shakes. If all of a sudden some company over here figures out a way to sell groceries and get a a higher margin at a lower price, then everybody's going to go to it. It actually keeps our prices down and
Yeah.
actually drives it that way. So this is economic policy 101. And I'm a business owner. I work in multiple states, and I'm telling you, like, this isn't just a Democrat Republican thing. Look, DeSantis, he runs a terrible economic ship in Florida. I know I just shocked some people. Look, they don't have any income tax down there. So do you know how they raise income taxes in Florida? They tax the bedevil out of any business. I'm paying the fines that you have to pay, the permit fees and all the fees and stuff that you have to pay, and the stuff they come after you, and they fine people not just a little bit. I mean, but just one little infraction can be a $50,000 fine, a $100,000 fine, and they get their
because
money.
the state's going to get their money.
Yeah, because Florida raises, I think it's over $100 million a year just on workman's comp violations. That's just on
Wow.
workman's comp violations, where they just fine people that they say, hey, you don't have everybody under workman's comp like you should, and you're going to get fined. So look, anytime you put the government, Democrats or Republicans, when you start throwing the government in there and you start letting them, get into the machinery of the economy, then what you're doing is you're picking winners and losers. I've seen this in the solar panel market. You remember solar energy is supposed to be so great?
Oh, yeah.
The thing is, the only reason it has ever sold anything is because the government was giving unreal tax incentives. And about 4 years ago in the state of South Carolina, selling solar was hot until the federal government all of a sudden pulled back the tax incentives where they weren't paying for it anymore. And now the solar companies have all gone bankrupt.
Yep.
Titan Solar was the largest in America, $2 billion company 2 years ago.
Say it again.
Just went bankrupt. You know why? Because the government was involved, and when they pulled back their control by the incentives, it tanked it. It wasn't. It was not set up on anything that was a sound economic principle. So when you start messing with the economics of our system from the government perspective, you start really messing with things. And this is where Trump has come out and said, hey, we need to pull back from this. We need to let the market do what the market does. We don't need to have these government, controls and entities. We need to take less taxes so there's more room for investment and people can keep more of their money and therefore generate higher revenues. This is all because, look, people that make money like to make money. And so if you will give them more money, they will reinvest it. They don't just put it in banks. They go spend it because they want to make more of it. This is a basic economic principles. But the problem is we're living in a country that is wanting, and this is where the Democrats and Republicans have struggled with this for years, is because, the Democrats have come in and said, hey, we need to. I even laughed at Michelle Obama standing up there in an $1,800 outfit with about 6 multi-million-dollar homes worth $70 million and told the rest of us how being a millionaire was just a shameful thing. And you're just sitting there going, but you are. In fact, before your husband got elected into the Senate, y'all were broke as jokes. So what happened? You served in the Senate 2 years, and then you served as president for 8 years and came out multimillionaires. How'd that happen?
Yep.
What went down? So, I mean, you're going to tell us how bad it is? I mean, the fastest way to get rich in America is 2 ways: to become a sports superstar, become a politician.
Yep.
That's the fastest ways. I mean, every person that comes out of Congress is rolling.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No. I'm trying to find this stat of the wealth before and after presidency, and the Obamas were worth something like 3 or 4 million before, which is still crazy that this is a senator nobody had ever heard of, and he's worth 3 or 4 million, and now they're worth close to 100 million, something like that. The Clintons were the worst, actually. The Clintons were worth maybe $1 million, and now they're worth 280 million. Whereas Trump actually lost somewhere close to half of his net worth in his first term. Now, when they made Truth Social go public, he got a portion of that back, a good portion of that back, but that was just recent. So he actually lost half of his net worth before he went into office, but every other president. And Reagan was actually the only one that I think his net worth only went up something like 40 or 50%, which was actually kind of reasonable. But I saw this recently. It was from Reagan to Trump and Biden also. It's honestly ridiculous. But I wanted to get to these questions before we get out of here.
Sure.
Matthew Thomas asked, and I'm going to actually add to this. He asked, how much of a factor do you think RFK Jr.'s role will play in the race? Do you think his endorsement will affect the voting, any, if at all? And I would actually add Tulsi Gabbard's recent endorsement into that. But I know Rod's kind of got some strong thoughts on RFK. So what do you think? Do you think it's going to matter, any at all, Rod? His endorsing of Trump just last week?
As far as the election is concerned, I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to have that big of an impact. It could. It could flip one of the swing states in Trump's favor, but third-party candidates and independents have a tendency to fizzle out right before the election because. People will look at the candidates and they'll say, well, if I vote for this guy, I'm kind of wasting my vote. And do I really want that person to get elected? No, I better go vote for this person. And they kind of move away from the independents and third party candidates at the last minute. That's historically
unless you're Ross Perot.
Well, depends on which time. Perot ran twice, and the first time he ran, he
cost Bush the election.
That's the theory. Yeah, but the second time he ran, he jumped out of the race and then he got back in, and he was kind of a non-factor.
Can I finish?
Yeah.
Cut
and dry, pure and simple, end of story.
I would jump in to say this. I don't think RFK by himself is going to move the needle. I don't think Tulsi Gabbard by herself can move the needle. Now, if Trump is able to amass more Democrats that can form, a conglomerate there, that you get 5 or 6 more Democrats coming your way, that cumulative effect of that look, could sway some independents to say, hey, because here's the problem is, with these two, they're kind of chickens without a home, so to speak. I mean, I don't know how to say, maybe I should say chickens, but you got RFK. He's not really loved or adored by Democrats. He's loved and adored by a certain group of mainly independents who, really are anti-vax. That's his big claim to fame.
Well,
anti-vax.
Not just, it's the pharmaceutical companies.
And pharmaceutical,
you have a lot of people that have bone to pick with the pharmaceutical companies.
And then Tulsi Gabbard, who has dropped out of the Democratic Party and became independent. And so if Trump if he can, just getting 1 or 2 of their endorsements probably ain't going to move it no more than, Joe Lieberman coming to John McCain really moved anything, back when he was running against Obama. But I think if you can chain those together and you get 4 or 5 more Democrats that just say they're way too far left, that does influence independents and moderate Democrats at that point. If you can get, 5 or 6 of those people, but that's a hard, basically, man, it's a hard deal because people don't understand how American politics runs. They think that when you go to Washington as a Democrat or Republican, that you're an independent with just an R or a D by your name. But it's not like that at all. You join an army, and when you get there, you do what that army says. And if you don't do what that army says, you will get blacklisted and banned, and you will not get money to get reelected. Well, they control you once you get there.
I think that's what he's pointed out, and I didn't watch his speech. I read the highlights, and he was kind of pointing out, and I don't think he called him out by name, but he basically was calling out the party for what they did to Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders should have been the candidate in 2016 and probably was the best candidate that they had in 2020 as well. And the Democratic Party sidelined him. I mean, like, dude, you had Joe Rogan putting this guy on and getting behind him. I mean, and people really, they wanted to see that that debate between him and what was it, Ted Cruz? Except it wasn't like mainlined, it wasn't mainstreamed, because it was a battle of the ideologies, right? But that's the kind of stuff that he's been calling out, and I don't know, man. I think you might need to come over to might need to go over to Twitter, because it's caused a lot of. I mean, if you go in the comment section, you see a lot of Dems that are coming over. I mean, this is Democratic Party royalty. This is the nephew of JFK and the son of Robert Kennedy, both killed by our own government, both assassinated by the U.S. government. Fact. I'll buzz myself. Straight facts. And you have this guy get behind Trump. I think I don't think it's not for nothing. It may not be, oh man, he's tipped it over to the net. It's a blowout, but I think it has some weight. Rod, you're rolling your eyes at me. You're rolling your eyes at me.
The word is there's more coming.
I think the main thing about RFK endorsing Trump is that he did it right at the end of the Democrat convention
instead of before.
Yeah, because typically a candidate gets a bump in the polls right after their convention. But he kind of stole their thunder by making that announcement right when Kamala Harris should have gotten a big bump coming out of the convention. And he did a speech where he just absolutely pummeled the Democrat Party for prohibiting freedom of speech, curtailing freedom of speech, and things that his father and his uncle fought for freedom of speech and believed in transparency, openness, and everything. I mean, it was a great speech because he pointed out why he left the Democrat Party. Basically, they left him. They left all the values that he felt that his family stood for, even though his family members took issue with him on this,
which is garbage. They don't want to lose their invitations to the club,
Right? Yeah, it's not politically correct to say that Trump isn't Hitler. But anyway, I think if anything, that speech and the way that he did it could have taken a little of Kamala Harris's energy coming out of that convention. Tulsi Gabbard, I don't think is going to be that big a factor, although she has volunteered to help Trump out in preparing for the debates because she
and burying Kamala under the school.
Yeah,
under the school bus because they're yellow. The school bus is yellow.
Yeah,
I'm so excited.
I just don't see that these endorsements are going to have a real substantial impact on the election. But you don't have to really move the numbers that much sometimes. I mean, what was the margin in Arizona in the last election? It was something like 20,000 votes. And same thing with Georgia. So it doesn't have to move things that much. I don't know. After Trump won the nomination and the election in 2016, I said, forget everything that I thought I knew about politics because all the rules have. I said, there's no way Trump's going to win because he's never been elected anything. And we don't elect people that have never served in public office. So Trump won't. And I didn't even think he was going to get the nomination. I said, Jeb Bush is the front runner. He's got all the money. He's got the name recognition. Jeb Bush is going to be the nominee. Trump is
he clobbered everybody in the primaries.
He obliterated all of the Republican opponents. And I said, well,
including
that's
Ted Cruz, which I was surprised.
Yeah, and I said, "Well,
Lion
okay, he
Ted.
he got the nomination, but he's not gonna beat Hillary." This is what I said. He might have beaten his Republican competition, but he's not gonna beat Hillary. Well, he beat Hillary. So I said, "Well, I guess I just don't know anything about American politics anymore because, this went against anything that I thought that I knew about American politics. We elected a guy who had never served, never been elected anything, and he said and did things that I thought were just absolutely, um, a cardinal sin for a politician to, he used profanity. Politicians didn't really do that before Trump. He showed an unflattering picture of Ted Cruz's wife, uh, and said John McCain wasn't a hero. I mean, he said and did a lot of crazy things, and I thought, well, you idiot, you're not going to win doing that. He won. So I don't, I
You
don't
know,
know what's going on anymore.
and
I
then he
don't know
moved
how
the
you.
embassy to Jerusalem. Then he walked in North Korea. I mean, no new wars. The best economics the country's seen in 50 years. I mean,
I'm just talking about the political part of it.
oh yeah.
I don't understand the political process anymore. It's not what I used to think that it was.
Well, it's
Uh,
I
and,
think, but I think that's the appeal of Trump, though. I think the appeal is that he did break it, and because I think everybody was tired of the same old, basically, uh, every campaign was the exact same, except you just had different players.
yeah.
It was the same rhetoric, same policy, same everything. Trump comes in and he starts doing some like really wild things, like uh, you know, uh, talking even some policies like imposing tariffs on China. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the Republicans had been long standing against this, and he comes in and says, "I'm doing it," or engaging with North Korea, which had been a no for every president, both sides of the parties, and he's going to go do it.
We killed
Um,
Soleimani. He died like a dog.
yeah, I mean, moving the embassy to Jerusalem out of Tel Aviv. I mean, these were things that other presidents, other people wouldn't have done. I think that
They'd been
is his.
saying it for 10 years, too. I mean,
Yeah,
Bush
I,
said it,
I
Clinton said it, Bush 2 said it,
yeah,
Obama said it, and none of them did it. And he's
yeah,
like, I'm doing it.
yeah, and I think that is his appeal to a degree. I do think this, Rod. I think he is running. I agree with you, and I actually believe this. I don't think Trump thought he was going to win in 2016. I don't think he believed that he was really going to pull it off. I think he was probably as shocked as anybody when he did win. And the crazy thing about it is I think that this time I'm seeing a much smarter and more calculated campaign that they're running this time than I've seen in the previous two times that he ran. I don't know. I guess he's got some different people. He doesn't have a Bannon. I mean, Bannon and some of them back in there telling him. But whoever he's got in there now is running a more measured. They're telling him to talk more on policy, to quit calling people names. He's quit some of that. He's kind of put some of that down, and he seems to be trying to run a more presidential, serious campaign. I do believe this too. Anybody that's followed campaigns for years, they run in waves of energy, and what I mean by that is it seems that candidates in a horse race like this will kind of have it like you just said. They'll have the Democratic National Convention and they'll get a bump, and the Republican National Convention get a bump, and then this will happen and they'll get a bump and they'll get a bump. And what really, when you're in a horse race like this, it comes to try to get that bump at the right time.
Mhm.
And so my feeling is this is just theory. My theory is that they're trying to save something here for that last push to get him the last bump. I think they're not wanting to peak too soon. I think that's why they're being real kind of chill about things. But I do think that in those final weeks, he will push hard to try to get that bump. Who knows? But I mean, here's the thing: is we all know this. This election really comes down to what, 5 or 6 states. It's going to come down to Pennsylvania, uh, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia.
Yep.
Georgia now. Florida is no longer a toss-up like it used to be. Ohio is not a toss-up like it used to be. You really are looking at Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, those big five. If Trump wins Pennsylvania and Georgia, it's over pretty much. I mean, because that's just how it works. But, who knows? I mean, but that's really where it's going to come down to, according to the electoral college.
And then you have these wild cards like California wanting to give illegal immigrants a $150,000 incentive to buy a home. I mean, how much abuse can Californians? How much abuse are Californians going to take before they start voting the other way? I mean,
there's.
Yeah, what'd you say, Rod? A lot?
A lot. They're not gonna
more than that. They've lost their minds. They're hopeless.
They're not gonna vote for a Republican.
Yeah.
You saw that when
they wouldn't even vote Newsom out.
Yeah, Larry Elder ran for governor, and I think he was by far a better candidate, but they stuck with. Too funny, but
Mao Zedong could rise from the dead, and they'd vote for him.
Do you guys know who Bryson DeChambeau is? Professional golfer, Bryson DeChambeau. He has a YouTube channel. Even though he is, one of the best golfers in the world, he also has a YouTube channel where he does these challenges just for fun. And he had Trump come on his channel and play golf with him. And this was a couple of months ago. That video had about 11 million views. And they're just riding around on one of Trump's golf courses. And they're not talking politics. Trump is just talking golf. Of course, Trump is a pretty good golfer. And you saw it in that video. You saw that he can actually play. For a 78-year-old man, he plays very well. And he had his modified golf cart where he had a state-of-the-art stereo system in his golf cart so that he can listen to the music he wants to listen to on the golf course. And anyway, the point was that video got 11 million views, and people got a chance to see Trump being a regular guy and not being what people perceive him as.
Yeah.
And then he went on the Theo Vaughn podcast.
That clip of him talking about his older brother with drugs and that's why he's never even, tried alcohol was, I tell you what, man, that was some good television, because you want to talk about humanizing that man. That was absolutely incredible. I don't know. Have you seen that, Jonathan, where they were talking about Theo Vaughn's battle with sobriety, and Trump told this whole story about his older brother. His whole life fell apart because of substance abuse, and his older brother was the one that told him, "Don't smoke, don't drink. It'll ruin your life. It's ruining mine." And that's why he never touched it. Man, let me tell you, that is a must watch.
And then he went on the Adrian Ross podcast. That guy's got like 2-3 million subscribers. And I'm just saying he's being very smart about reaching younger people through these podcasts, because he realizes that the mainstream media and the conventional networks are not the way to reach people anymore.
Nope.
Podcasts with these guys that have 1 million, 2 million, 3 million subscribers.
Yep. And they can't do it with Kamala, because they've tried it with Kamala, and she's going on there talking about her favorite rapper. She's lying through her teeth, talking about music artists that were not even they weren't even alive when she was in school. Yeah, she's been on
Charlemagne the God.
Yep,
on his
Breakfast
podcast.
Club.
Right.
I mean, she's out there pandering harder than Hillary Clinton. I mean, she might as well just have a bottle of hot sauce and ranch in her purse. I mean, and the thing is, go in the comment section and no, seriously, man, the amount of black folk that have put out videos clipping her stupid behind, and they're getting ticked off. They're legitimately getting angry because it is so blatantly racist how she's pandering. And then they're seeing these videos where, dude, like 7 months ago, like, you were the first Indian senator. You were the Indian this, Indian that. Now all of a sudden you're black? Bro, they're taking her to task, man. I mean, you should see the black commentators. I can't even repeat half the stuff they're saying. Because, I mean, it's atrocious, man. They are hot.
Side note, my favorite of all time is Elizabeth Warren drinking that beer. You remember seeing that clip?
She don't even know how to hold a beer can. She's like, I just like to have a beer at the end of the day.
She bought that thing. It was hilarious.
Pandemonium, man.
If you haven't seen it, Rod, you got to go look it up. Elizabeth Warren drinking the beer. I mean, buddy, it was.
Oh,
it
yeah,
was
dude. Yeah.
Biggest backfire.
Flame of the Spirit brings up a great point, and actually, I've got a question from them. Meg the Stallion performance was a tipping point for me. Can't respect her. A lot of black folk were absolutely infuriated. Black folk over the age of 30, they're like, this is what you think we're about? Booty shaking? Like, this is what we're about? This. I mean, dude, like, it's offensive. It's absolutely offensive. But she, Flame of the Spirit had a question. How do you guys approach? And this is I think really important that we kind of park the bus here, because we don't want to be ignorant, right? Where do you guys approach researching politics? There seems to be so much conflicting information out there. How do you get the truth, and how do you get the facts? Where are you guys going? Is what Flame wanted to ask, or did ask.
Alex Jones.
I'm kind of retarded.
I couldn't help it. I figured that was less offensive than they're turning the frogs gay. But I mean, even though they did turn the frogs gay, mind you, he was 100% right.
My approach is I listen to everybody. I like PBS, and I realize ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, you're going to get a skewed CNN, you're going to get a skewed view there, but you're also going to get a skewed view watching Fox or Newsmax, Gateway Pundit. But if you listen to a little bit of everybody, you can usually get a sense of where the facts are. And that takes a lot of time, a lot of patience, but I don't just listen to any one source. I think that's a very myopic view, is to say, well, I like, was it One America News? Some
Newsmax.
Yeah. Some people, they pick out their favorite one. That's all they listen to. And you're going to miss out on a lot of stuff, like this whole Kamala Harris and the $100 million economic plan. I looked into that a little bit, and I thought, I see how the Republicans were kind of misrepresenting that a little bit. But at the same time, I do think that she lacks an understanding of economics. But you're not going to know that if all you listen to is people on the right. You're not really going to get that representation of what her plan is. So, and you listen to pundits on radio. A lot of times you've got to be over the top on radio to get ratings.
Like Rush was.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess it's not just radio, even websites. You see websites sometimes that they can't wait to jump on everything that the candidate says and present.
Make a headline.
Worst possible light. So that's one reason I like PBS, is because PBS isn't driven by ratings. They get government money. I mean, certainly they are left leaning to a certain extent, but you don't hear the shouting matches. You don't hear all that on PBS. They do have a more restrained analysis of the news. And so, the more sources, the better. And do a little fact checking on everybody.
Yeah.
Because none of these people are right 100% of the time.
Before you go,
My,
Jonathan, I just wanted to say, like, I think the difficulty is, though, most people don't have the time to listen to more than one source. You know, I think that's the challenge. But go ahead, Jonathan.
yeah, so you're actually speaking to what I was going to say. I am not a big podcast listener or YouTube watcher. And it really just comes down to time. I just don't have the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very busy person. I don't have time to sit and listen to a bunch of podcasts or watch a bunch of YouTube channels or things like that. And I still, I'm old school. I still like, to watch some shows. So I know a lot of them, younger America especially, they may catch something on Netflix every once in a while, but I still like to watch Law and Order or, some kind of show, something like that.
I had
Yeah.
to. That's my show. The original Law and Order is my show.
So for years, I've been much more of a reader because I can read it faster than I can watch it. I like to read things, and my number one go-to source, it's an app you can get on your phone, is Real Clear Politics. And the reason I like Real Clear Politics is because Real Clear Politics has never been partisan either way. They will present articles every day that show the direct opposite of each other. They'll post an article from the New York Times, and they'll post an article from the New York Post. And they usually group them. They actually group them so that they match up. And so, yeah, you're seeing it right there. You can see it online too. But if you go to Real Clear Politics, it's like, you're going to see stuff from all the major papers: American Spectator, The Nation, New York Post, Fox News, New York Times, Chicago Tribune. And so, and literally the thing I love about it is it just kind of gives, both sides. And the reason I love it is I get to see what the other side really is thinking when I'm looking at Real Clear Politics, because it's showing what the other side is thinking, and they kind of show both sides of it. Then their poll section, they have polls, and they have all the national polls listed from every state, even down to the Senate races, latest news, the popular stuff. I mean, it's a great resource. So a lot of times I look at Real Clear Politics every day, and we'll pick a couple of articles a lot of times to just read through and check polls and see what people see. It kind of gives me an idea. And the other thing, like Rod said, it gives me an idea to see what the other side's thinking. If you never listen to what the other side says, you're never going to really understand where they're coming from. And so I love doing that. And, the other thing I really like listening or reading is I am a subscriber to the Daily Wire. And I just think that Ben Shapiro and his cast there are some of the most smartest, intelligent people when they look into the conservative side of politics. So let me say this. I mean, I'm a conservative, so of course I like Daily Wire. But the problem is a lot of conservative resources, Fox and some of them, they're just more bomb throwing. Let me just blow it up here and show you, and it's kind of just almost an echo chamber of, and so Fox News can be that way. Daily Wire is a little bit more of introspection, of, explaining it out. I thought that, some of Shapiro is a Jew, and some of Shapiro's explanations through this, Palestinian, Israeli stuff that's been going on, and what the Democrats have been, espousing and saying and, supporting, has been dynamic commentary, because it's just like, wow. I mean, it's irrefutable. I think Ben Shapiro is one of the smartest guys out there when it comes to he's the guy that will go into a university and talk about things like transgender and leftist
He was one of the first. He was the one of first to start doing that.
Yeah. So I actually subscribe to that. It's called the Daily Wire Plus. And I really, they talk about a lot of the things and really answer questions. And yeah, there's some bomb throwing in there, but a lot of it is deep. It's really if you're a conservative and you really want to be able to find out why conservatives believe what they believe and how to defend the conservative side, Daily Wire is the place to go, because
Yeah.
it's not just bomb throwing. It is, this is what we think, and this is why we believe it, and this is the principles that it's founded on. So those are my two big sources. I'm a reader more than a watcher. Don't do a lot of watching or listening, but I do a lot of reading. So, Real Clear Politics and Daily Wire are my big ones.
I think it also is a good idea sometimes to get news from outside of the country. Like the Jerusalem Post, the newspaper there.
Yeah.
RT, surprisingly, RT has some excellent reporting. They're Russian, but they have English-speaking division that gives you stories from journalists in other parts of the world. You'll get a perspective there that you're not going to get from many American media outlets. So, and you got to take that into consideration. They're going to be slanted probably in a different direction, but a lot of times you'll find out things are reported in other countries that we never hear about here. We think,
Oh, absolutely.
We think that we've got the most freedom of the press anywhere in the world. But it's surprising how much doesn't get reported in American media outlets that the rest of the world knows about.
Well, it's because, what is it, 2 or 3 companies own our 5 biggest, sources of media and news. So it's controlled.
Yeah, which is why I've always kind of liked some of these places like Daily Wire. These are independent, not controlled. I mean, Fox, I like some of the, I've always liked Greg Gutfeld, who has his night show, and he comes with some pretty funny commentary sometimes. He does more of making fun of it from the right side, and how stupid some of it is. But I've been following him a long time, before he even got his own show, who was always, Gutfeld was always kind of a center-right kind of guy, and then really, has gone more right over the years, and I think the other thing is, I would tell everybody this, but as you come into these last 8 weeks, Gabe and I were talking about this today, it doesn't do any good to argue with people on Facebook or even in person about politics. The first thing you have to ask is if somebody really wants to have a serious conversation.
Yeah.
And if they're not willing to have a serious conversation, you're just wasting your time and breath and their time. And so, I mean, when I come up upon people that may feel differently than I do about politics, one thing I think we have to really get away from is trying to demonize them. It's like, that they're demons for feeling a certain way. I told people, I guess the reason I'm this way, I mean, my grandfather was a staunch Union Democrat that told my dad one time he wouldn't vote for Reagan for dog catcher. And I mean, he was a Democrat and voted for Clinton twice, even after Lewinsky voted for it. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? He's a fine Christian man, loved God, but he was a Democrat because he was a Union man, World War II veteran. I mean, a pro-America guy. But my point is, if people aren't going to have a serious conversation, like, I don't have no problem sit down and say, well, let's talk policy. I mean, do you really think these price controls are going to work? Do you really think this is a legitimate day? Let's talk about Israel and Palestine and, what they're calling for and what from the river to the sea means. Let's talk about unrestricted abortion. Is that really where we want to go with this? Let's talk about these policies. And if people want to have a discussion, that's one thing. But if they're just going to bomb throw like 90% of people seem to want to do, I think 90% of Americans have already made up their mind, and these last 8 weeks are about the 10% who haven't. And then how that's going to sway is what's going to happen.
Yeah, David Wilson, you're right on about listening to Milton Friedman. If you want to learn about economics, I implore you, Milton Friedman and Thomas Sowell, Milton Friedman. absolute treasures in America, and it's sad that I only found out about Thomas Sowell 6 years ago, something like that. I mean, that's a guy that should be. I mean, he should be kind of commonly known, common knowledge, but
In fact,
he doesn't get along with the program, and he's black, or he's dark brown skinned, so
And in fact, the point I was thinking about Rod when he talked about Nixon imposing that 90-day price control. Milton Friedman was one who actually, I think he's the one who said it was a very popular thing at the time. Actually, 75% of Americans supported that price control that Nixon imposed, and I think it was Milton Friedman that said, "Sometimes we're too stupid to get out of our own way." In other words, he thought it was a dumb policy, and he later turned up to be right. He said because all it did was suppress the inflation, and after the election was over and the price controls were lifted, inflation came blazing in, and just it unleashed its ugly head. It just delayed the inflation. It didn't stop it.
Yep. You're 100%. And then the second part, if you guys have any more questions, you better get them in real quick because we're about to wrap this up. But the second part of Flame of the Spirit's question was, I'd love to see how Gabe researches these issues and how they contribute to his conspiracies. See, we have two very balanced. I mean, like here we got Rod listening to PBS and reading the Jewish Post and listening to ABC, CBN, and NBC, so we don't have to, and even CNN and Jonathan introduced all of us to what was it? Real world politics, real news politics, real clear politics.
Real clear politics.
Yeah, that's amazing. And of course, the Daily Wire, which we're supporters of the Daily Wire. But I don't really go. I went and I watched the documentaries. I watched.
He's on the dark web.
Listen, I just about because I just don't trust. I'm looking at everybody sideways these days. I'm like, who is controlled opposition and who is actually? I'm out here looking for the renegades. Because the renegades, the guys that are out here trying to get pushed, that are getting pushed off the platforms, like Alex Jones, like the Steven Crowders, if I want to get my, the what is it they call it? Not modern events. What is it? Something events. What is it? What's that phrase? Current events. Yeah. If I want to get current events, I go to Steven Crowder and I go to Tim Cast because Tim Cast
and Perry Stone.
No, listen. So this is what you do. You go to the Renegades for the news, and then you go to the Prophecy guys, which I go to Prophecy Watchers, Prophecy Watchers, Ellie Marzulli. I don't listen to Ellie Marzulli as much. He's been kind of like, he puts out stuff every day, but honestly, his content's really not fantastic. You get like 5 minutes.
Do you speed watch?
No, because sometimes guys just don't articulate very well. So if you put that thing on fast, the beautiful thing is a lot of what I do is on the computer, so I can have that going on the background while I'm working, while I'm editing video and stuff. So, I wish I could listen to Glenn Beck more, but everything with him is doom and gloom. And same thing with Mark Levin. I think Mark Levin is brilliant, but if you listen to them for a week, you will be in a bunker. You'll be in a bunker just waiting for the end of the world. I mean, it's just like the Satanists are taking over. At least Alex Jones, he'll make you laugh.
You'll be in a corner eating M&Ms. You'll just be like, oh, my God.
Rod, my Rod's just like, he's just shaking his head like, oh, Gabe, you've really... I've gone down in his esteem of me. Oh, Lord.
Yeah, Glenn Beck, you'll be in the corner eating M&Ms.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not saying, I dislike him or that he's wrong most of the time. It's just, at least with the Daily Wire guys, it is balanced, like you said. They try to be factual, or if they're going to do human interest stories, it's, it's just that. Like there was a thing, Michael Knowles actually had a clip the other day. And, and I kind of peek in TikTok and Instagram, to kind of see what's going on. TikTok's a great place if you want to, there was just a point of fact, like, we all saw that, or actually this wasn't reported. Did you guys see that plane that crashed over Brazil right after taking off the other day?
Yeah.
That didn't make big news, right? Do you know who was on that plane?
Doctors.
And someone that was currently suing a bunch of airlines, like a specialty airline, like somebody that's their profession was to keep the airlines in check. And if you look at who was actually on that plane, I mean, it's kind of like that guy that unalived himself that was going to testify for Boeing. So, I think it's like when you like a car accident, you have to get these guys, as you see, they're trying to get a consensus from everybody, like, listen, let me get all the perspectives to try to put the truth together. And unfortunately, there's some things that just society has deemed unacceptable. I mean, it's like everything with the UFOs and whatnot. I mean, the government was telling us the government has been telling us for so many years that the UFOs were not real, and Oswald was killed. Oswald killed JFK, and I mean, if you buy that, I got some land I want to sell you. I mean, I got a bridge and some land I want to sell you, because they've even admitted, I mean, that the UFOs are not what they've been saying for 60 years.
I'm convinced Gabe really doesn't sleep but about 30 minutes a night so he can get in on all this stuff. I mean, I'm like, where do you find
I don't need
the time?
amphetamines, baby. I got the Holy Ghost and conspiracies. I got the truth, brother. If you want to know the truth, I got the documents right here.
He's replaying that Jesse Ventura special that came on years ago about all the conspiracies.
Yo, listen, that book. Listen, I'm just asking questions. I wish I could do a good Jesse. I need to work on my Jesse Ventura impersonations. But listen, man, that book he wrote called, it's like 13 or 27 documents the U.S. government doesn't want you to read. Let me tell you, man, that'll blow your hair back. That will blow your hair back, man. That is some messed up stuff that are,
Did we go to the moon? That's what we want to know.
I don't know. Rod, let me tell you, Rod is the best compelling evidence that we did. My brother Rod Saunders, he always reminds me of it. He's like, man, we got the reflectors up there, and I'm like, you know what? That's a good point. That's a good point. They can shoot a laser at that moon, and it'll reflect back. So I'm like, well, somebody had to go up there.
It is possible that an unmanned vessel put them up there.
Listen, Rod. Don't get me on my excuses now. He's
the whole
issue.
But really,
the Van Allen radiation belt. If we could get through the Van Allen radiation belt without getting cooked, then it was doable. But that's the whole point of contention.
Well, it's like this,
and that's
Rod.
the thing. I mean, like what we went up in aluminum cans, and how did they make it through that belt? And how did all that film? There's just so much stuff that I wish they would have just said, "Hey, look, we went up there, but we couldn't film anything because it all got destroyed when we came through." Of course, then people would say, "Well, where's the evidence? All the evidence was destroyed." But then all the telemetry data, we lost it. All the telemetry data, like this is Constitution level.
But listen, though, I mean, the way that we can get those laser reflections, though, is because of the firmament, because we're really in a flat Earth situation.
Yeah. Hey, man, it's just shooting off of water. That's how they just shot it up there in that firmament water and in the ice shield that's around the Earth. That a lot of it came down during the flood because the water's below and beneath. Listen, I can go there with you, bro. I can go there with. Listen. You want to know why you have to be careful, y'all? I had a friend of mine. He's on me. Like he is with me with a lot of this stuff. But the flat Earth thing, he's like, no, listen, he's a firearms expert. I mean, he gets in helicopters and does long range stuff. He's incredible. And he's like, I know, I've seen the Coriolis effect. I know all this stuff. Then 3 years later, because I was kind of starting to wade in those waters, and I'm like, man, they're raising some interesting questions. There's evidences for and there's evidences against. And then 3 years later, he's like, yeah, you're right, Vance. We're getting ridiculous. I'm gonna stop. But he came back almost convinced. He's like, listen, man, I don't know if I believe anything anymore. Okay.
Well, all I mean, it's like this. It's what we have to be careful is the government has has put through, that dihydrogen monoxide everywhere, and people are partaking of the dihydrogen monoxide, and that is causing great problems. So,
well, you don't want to get me started on chemtrails, baby.
but you know what dihydrogen monoxide is? It's H2O.
Oh my gosh.
See how I can get a conspiracy theory going? See, it's dihydrogen monoxide. That means it's H2O. It's water, and the government's got everybody drinking this water, and it's
You got me on that one, but yeah, I thought it was. I can't remember.
He was about to go there.
Well, because I couldn't remember the chemical. I was like, well, I don't know about that chemical, but I know the other chemical, like one of the chemicals that they put in the chemtrails. That, I mean,
Gabe was about to get off his thing and be like, dihydrogen monoxide. What's going on here?
I was gonna look it up, and then you would have got a text in 15 minutes, been like, you joker. But that's the thing. I don't take what anybody says at face value. I go and I check it. I verify it. And if it's a bunch of hogwash, I'm like, it's a bunch of hogwash. So, and to me, the ultimate thing is, does it line up with Scripture? If it doesn't line up with Scripture, doesn't make sense with Scripture, or if it has no bearing on Scripture, then it's like, whatever. That's where Rod and I are, when we discuss Old Earth, Young Earth, like we had that conversation with Dr. Grady McMurtry, who will be in North Carolina in a week. It's not a salvific issue. It's fun to discuss, and it does have some implications biblically, but it doesn't overturn the narrative.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's fun, guys. I appreciate you being on here, Rod, and thanks for coming on and discussing this stuff. It's fun for me. I enjoy listening and talking about this stuff.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I do have to take issue with you on one thing, though, Jonathan.
That's fine.
I don't think Greg Gutfeld is funny. At all.
Well, I like slapstick stuff like that.
I've always wondered how in the world. I know he's very successful. He gets the best ratings, but I just don't get it.
I think the people that he has on is funny, but he's never, anytime I see clips, it's of other guests, but I've never actually watched the show.
Well, he used to he started at Fox on the weekends and having a show called the Red Eye, which I think came on at like 2 or 3 in the morning. And he would have all these slapstick guys on. It was like a even crazier version of his Gutfeld show. And he would do it in the middle of the night. And I would wake up and watch that stuff and just kind of get tickled at him. And then I always liked his commentary on the Five. When I would listen to that, he always had this piffy comments on the Five that I just thought were kind of funny. And then I started watching a little bit of his show. Yeah.
He's an atheist.
Oh, really? Yeah, I know.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that because he's a conservative, but there are
big time
several conservative atheists. George Will is an atheist, and then the guy that used to be with Jimmy Kimmel on the Man
George
Show.
Will's a.
I know who you're talking about. Adam
Carolla.
Adam Carolla.
But George Will's a never Trumper, isn't he?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
He can't stand Trump.
Yeah, he doesn't like Trump, and I was really surprised to find out that George Will is an atheist. So and he's a conservative guy, but he's just he's uber intellectual.
That's interesting because you don't see many of them being conservatives.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to come back. Listen, we're going to have to come back next month because Lord knows what's going to happen between now and the end of September. So we're gonna get Rod back on here, and we're gonna have to do some more of these because the amount of craziness that's happening on a daily basis. I'm just gonna kind of have to keep like a running tab of things and like, hey, remember when that happened? Because there's so much happening. It's hard to remember what happened like 6 weeks ago. It's absolutely crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. So Yep, we're going to let these guys go. Thank you all so much. Make sure you subscribe to Rod's channel, Jew in Greek. I think a lot of you came over here from there. And if you haven't subscribed to Soul Vitamins, come over and make sure you like this stream tonight. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications so you don't miss when we go live. We're going to be on here next week with Stephen Reese, the Hebraic roots music guy, talking about frequencies and healing things. He's been doing tremendous ministerial work in India. They've seen tremendous miracles there, so we're going to be talking about that. And, of course, subscribe to Gabriel Bella Music. And if you're looking for great Christian music that has more than 4 chords, make sure to go to GabrielBellaMusic.com and support my ministry of by faith music that we're trying to get this studio done. I'm trying to pull up this website because it... Frohawk Ministries.
No,
By Faith Studio.
Frohawk Ministries.
Frohawk. Yeah, it is. We're going to see the barber tomorrow, bring it down a little bit. Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Brother David Wilson, for sharing Jew and Greek to your Clinton Assembly pastor. Yeah, Rod's doing amazing work in apologetics, and we had a great live stream Friday discussion, so we'll see all of y'all soon. God bless you. Jesus loves you, and so do we. Take care.